Jim, I gotta come around more often, honey.
Honey, I love you. Are you kidding? Do
I
you,
love you.
you feel the
Hi.
love?
I feel it.
First of all,
Mwah.
congratulations. Congratulations on so many things, but specifically your gorgeous performance in New York State of Mind. Um, you
Thank
guys
you.
at home, if you haven't seen it, look, first of all, hello. If you haven't seen it, some of the city's most recognizable performers are singing, dancing, playing instruments in this beautiful arrangement of a Billy Joel song. And you are in some good company, honey.
Oh my gosh. Tom Kitt, who was the musical director for Head Over Heels and pretty much practically half of everything on Broadway, called me and asked me would I do it. And at that time, I mean, when he calls, I'm probably going to say yes, no matter what it is. And so, I didn't even know who else would be involved or who'd be in it. He just said, we're getting some folks together. It's one of obviously there's a Broadway component to it, but it's about all things New York, obviously, and it's a love letter to New York, as is the original song. Obviously, there's not, we didn't have to do too much. It's a brilliant song by Billy Joel, but you know, it just felt like everything was so right. Like there wasn't anything that was wrong with this idea. So many fabulous performers and artists working in front of and behind the camera. At not only notable performers and legends and vocalists and musicians, but also you know historic locations.
I,
And the fact that the
I
fact
love
that we were able to have Suzanne Vega in Tom's Diner, I was like, I'm all for it.
the cast of characters. It's Stephen Colbert and Sarah Bareilles and Stokes Mitchell and Adina and Kelly O'Hara and Victoria Clark, produced by Tom and NYC Next. We want to make sure to mention them. They were
Hmm.
also producing. What did it mean to be? I mean, you're used to being part of these iconic things filled with great performers. But God, what does it feel like to have been part of this really historic New York moment?
Well, I mean, it just felt good on so many levels. Just uh, as a New Yorker, to be able to take part in something that was um, so heartfelt with a classic Billy Joel song. It's enough. And then you have all these other Broadway performers that I look up to, that I was able to sing alongside. And, you know, that is a really particular personal meaning because I moved to New York to go to school for musical theater performance in hopes to one day be on Broadway. And, that was not the easiest accomplishment. It isn't for anyone. And now looking at my life and career and my experiences 20 years after moving to New York, it feels, it feels wonderful. And it feels like something, on one hand, I'm pinching myself like, you're so lucky and so fortunate to be able to do this. And on the other hand, I feel like I'm happy that there was
Well, you've done the
representation.
work. You've done the work. You've studied. You've worked your ass off. I know. Listen, you are speaking to somebody who spent decades singing in clubs and bars, and it's my joy. I love it, but
Mhm.
it's a lot of work, and so I know you put in the work. And
Yeah.
well, let's talk a little bit about a few years ago. You came out as trans on the Daily Show,
Mhm.
but it wasn't until you had the conversation on RuPaul's Drag Race that this really became a huge story. Were you nervous about how your transness would be perceived on that particular show?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I know, and lots of people who work in the context of drag and have been to drag clubs and everything, know that trans folks and trans women have been contributing to the art form of drag for since
Since all.
probably the beginning of drag. Yeah, but it's as as is with any mainstream sort of thing, the representation isn't always as obvious or apparent. uh and so yes, there have been lots of performers and queens who had done RuPaul's Drag Race who then came out as trans, or there certainly are a lot of many trans women who are associated with Drag Race the show, but there really haven't been that many shining moments for trans people on the show. And there certainly were some legendary moments that are very memorable that were inspiring to me and touching. But I when I went on there, I still had the fear. Nobody had really talked about it with me, like the
Right.
producers or anybody. But when I went on there, I had fear that I wouldn't be accepted by the other queens on the show, or the producers and the people who create the show, that the fan base would say that I don't belong on there because I'm a trans woman, which is, when I was auditioning and gearing up to go on the show, people have to remember we were in there's always controversy around trans issues on the show. I can't deny that. But we were in the throes of this heated argument about whether or not you could say certain words that are now deemed derogatory for good reason on the show, that had been used on the show. And there was a debate that spilled out from the show onto Facebook. And I saw my friends saying, don't tell me what words I can say. Gay guys saying, I was like, what is going on? And so the atmosphere around discussing trans individuals, trans issues, and um, whether or not we have the right to do blank, which constantly seems to be a debate uh, by
About
everyone except for
everything.
us.
About everything. Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's,
Uh,
I appreciated that it wasn't used as your particular story wasn't used as like a Real Housewife kind of drama. It seemed like a natural conversation about gender, and I think the overall kind of casualness of the conversation was barrier breaking.
Thank you. Well, it certainly was rare. There haven't been a lot of moments that have gone down exactly like that on Drag Race.
I'm
Um,
sure. Oh,
and so I was afraid when I went there. I knew it was inevitable. I knew. I mean, I was already out as trans. I'd already been living my life, happily, and so it was inevitable. It's nothing I can change or like erase or really hide about myself. But I didn't want it to be at the forefront because I didn't want it to be used as an excuse to exclude me from even getting in the door. And I
right,
didn't want it to be used as an excuse to eliminate me. And so
right,
I wanted to wait until I was comfortable, which was like the second day. And
right.
then when we were there and we were having our conversation, and I knew right away from everyone involved, everyone that I was coming into contact with, that I was having conversations with, that we were having really intelligent conversations about gender, and it wasn't just around my gender; it was other people on the show as well. And so I felt very comfortable, and then I knew it was all good, and I wanted to really lean into the drag because I didn't want them to say, "Oh, you're relying on your body, or you're doing, you have an advantage because you have a surgery or that or this." I just wanted to lean into my drag and whatever skill I may or may not bring to the art form. And so that's what I tried to do. It wasn't until later when we were watching it back, that I was seeing it play out, that I was able to see sort of the connection and the significance that it would have meant for me as a young trans person watching
Oh,
the show.
look, you have a giant megaphone to help change the world, to help change that world and a lot of worlds. I'm so proud um, to know you and to tell you that.
Yeah.
And you continue to do these incredible things. You have a new. Tell me about Call Me Mother. Tell me.
Call me mother. I mean, look, everybody knows drag is in style and fashion. It probably isn't going to go out of style.
Okay.
And so we want to see drag in as many places as possible. And so Call Me Mother is a drag reality show, reality competition show. It's three mothers, three drag houses with chill drag children, and there will be one winner. And it's what's so great about this is, contrary to the conversation that we were just having, the feelings that I was going through, the casting notice was for, we, if you are a trans queen, we want you, or a trans king, we want you, or a non-binary entertainer, we want you. We want every type of, anybody who does drag, any type of gender expression, or any, even any iteration of drag. Maybe you're not trans, but your drag is, non-binary, kind of, more androgynous, if you will. And so that was the casting notice, which meant that we knew we were going to get a very diverse group of competitors, and we did. And I had a great time filming it, and I hope people will enjoy it.
It
There's
premieres
some
this
really
fall.
dramatic moments.
Oh, I bet. Well, you've got to. When does it premiere?
It premieres this fall. The date is going to be announced probably next week, hopefully.
So you guys follow Peppermint on all the social media, and she will let you know.
Yeah, it's on. It'll be available for viewing on Out TV, which is, it's a Canadian channel, but they're launching in the United States, and so they'll be able to watch. People will be able to watch on Out TV, whether you're in Canada or the United States, and on Fruit TV in the UK or on the internet, wherever.
Great. Okay. So whatever, just find it. Last year, you released an EP called "A Girl Like Me: Letters to My Lovers." Now, when I read this, I thought, oh, this is going to be a happy, peppy recording, bursting with club tracks, and I was wrong. I would be wrong there. This is really personal. I would say serious, but there are all kinds of many tempos. But this is a really vulnerable piece of work that you put together.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, I'd always felt a certain pressure in making music in the past to create something that was going to play in the club. Um, and probably because we weren't in any clubs
Right.
last year,
Exactly.
I felt the freedom to focus on the side of me that's not in drag, the trans woman, and my experiences just as a trans woman during the day in love and life. And particularly in love, because I was watching so many, I remember, just even generally as a queer person growing up, I don't, there's lots of people we know now are out as queer, who are singers and performers in mainstream music and pop stars. But I don't think I can remember anyone singing. Even Katie Lang was kind of like
Not out.
ambiguous. Yeah, not out.
Exactly.
And
Well,
never mentioned.
try being 100 years old and looking for those. We had Paul Lind, and that
Of
was.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you look?
Where do you go? And so we were hard pressed to find that, even into, I think, certainly into the 2000s. Now, obviously, we have lots of fabulous out queer artists who I don't know if they're enjoying as much mainstream success as they would have had they not been out. But what I do know is it's important to have these stories told in a very straightforward way. And I wanted, I could have been extremely poetic and sort of like cagey about all the experiences. I was like, no, I mean, obviously I'm trans, but I wanted to just like put this out and speak about, what it's like to date as a trans woman, and maybe what it's like to date a trans woman, so that people can kind of use it maybe as a blueprint for understanding that if you're trans and queer, you are deserving of love. And if you're not, you would be so lucky to date someone who's queer, who's done work on themselves, meaning like emotionally, spiritually, kind of introspectively. When you when you grow up and you're feeling isolated, the journey for a lot of queer people is self-acceptance and then resilience and then growth in a way that I think you're not challenged if you wouldn't have to do if you weren't challenged in that way. And that's particularly true of trans people, of course. And so I wanted people to be able to see that we are worthy of the same types of spoils of love and failures in love that everybody else has.
Well, it's dark and sexy, but it's also, by the way, really sexy. There's a song called Best Sex, which is hilariously dirty and dishy and oh, it's so good. It's about a one night stand. I'm being polite.
Yeah.
But then you followed it up with one of my all time favorite pop songs, Carole King and Jerry Goffin's Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? It's a beautiful performance, by the way, with
Thank you.
Daniel Shevlin on cello.
Yeah, Daniel Shevlin,
Yeah.
who is a great friend of mine, who also we went to school together from Well Strung, the group,
Yeah.
and he's featured on a lot on the album because I was like, I want beautiful cello on this whole album, and he came into the studio and did a great job. And yeah, the we were, obviously I had the opportunity to look back at my influences and use those to create music. But then when it came to Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, I thought that the it's just so perfectly written, and it's obviously a beautiful song. And I think when sung by a queer person, about a potential, maybe that first encounter, it's not a one night stand from my perspective. It's that first encounter where you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that was my experience that I actually had in real life. I met my boyfriend on a hookup app, and then I had my walls up and I was like, you're done. Thanks for the ride. And then he was like, no, and he stayed over, and then he just never left. I mean, he's gone now. There's a breakup song, spoiler. But he it was that type of experience, and so I felt like it matched perfectly with the lyrics of the song. So
It,
I also
it,
want to give a shout out to Brian Flores, who was the star. I think he was it Hip Pippin? Yeah, I think it was the touring cast of Pippin, but he was
okay.
also in Head Over Heels with Me. And he arranged the music and even wrote the intro. It was wonderful. And so I just feel great all around. Thank
You
you.
should be so proud of that, of the whole project for many reasons, but that musically is just heaven. You guys,
Thank
you
you.
gotta get it. You brought up Broadway. Hello, we have to talk about Broadway. You were the first trans woman to originate. I'm telling you this like you weren't, like you might not know. Uh, the first trans woman to originate a major role on Broadway in the gorgeous Head Over Heels, which was a very trans positive 16th century romance featuring the music of the Go Go's.
I mean, come on.
I mean, come on, another one of those.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and it felt very full. Personally, it felt very full circle because, like I said, I moved to New York City to go to acting school, and there just weren't there really wasn't a lot for me to work on, or I mean, I did went to school, but there wasn't a lot to, when you're in those grueling 6 a.m., 7 a.m. dance classes and acting classes, and it's a conservatory, so there's no break. And there's not a lot of like moments to be like, I have a dream of doing this on Broadway, because there really weren't any moments like that that I could look up to. And so they were giving me like the role of like, of course they were giving me like drag roles, to play, which was like a few. And then, then I got like Jack and the Beanstalk, whatever, from Into the Wood,
Oh, right.
and which is lovely. But I was like, this
Yes.
is not me.
Hmm.
And so it just felt like there wasn't really a place for me or wouldn't be a place for me on Broadway. So personally, it felt very full circle
Oh
to
my
be able
God,
to
because
go,
it was crafted for you.
yeah.
Were you able to discuss the role and what you could serve to it
Oh,
with
honey, I talked about what I was going to be
The
serving.
director? Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the role it was written before I came to the show. It was played in sort of it was played in a different way or written in a different way by Shakina Nafak originally. And I don't even think the role of the of Pythio, who is the Oracle in the show. I don't think the role didn't exist when it first debuted at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So
Yeah.
then took they rearranged it, rewrote some stuff, and then blossomed the role for me to step into. And it was very collaborative, down to the text. The one of my favorite lines in the show. um I wouldn't even
I
say
know.
it. Was co-written by Andrew, who played the lead in the show,
Andrew
Andrew
Durant,
Duran.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just so many like drag-isms that are in there. Um, and so yeah, it was a really collaborative effort, and I look back and there's so many of my own isms in there, and I know maybe I know what it's like now. Of course, I know what it's like to originate a role. I know what it's like to look back on something. Like I remember thinking, you know, when I went and saw the original cast of Rent, which is very seminal for many reasons on Broadway, and it was very difficult for me to picture anyone else
Right.
other than the original cast, other than Daphne Rubin Vega, other than Adam Pascal playing these parts because it feels like it's so them, right? And so now we, the original cast, will have that
That's
same.
right. And you'll sit in the audience at some point and see some fabulous goddess doing your role. That's going to
Yeah,
be very weird.
I look forward to it. Hopefully, I don't feel too old.
Hello, welcome to my book. That cast, Rachel York and Jeremy Kushner and the goddess Bonnie Milligan. Um,
Oh,
it was such fun. That was really a dream
it
cast.
was
And
I do think it was a wonderful it was such I think it was very well cast. I just really, really do. Everyone else was so wonderful in it, and we had we had, I think, a very good mix of Broadway. I would like to call them, I don't know if we would call them Broadway legends yet, but Broadway mainstays who
oh,
are have speaking of Rent, Jeremy Kushner was in Rent, and then was also in Aida, and then originated in Footloose, and he has so many Broadway credits, right? Rachel York has so many fabulous Broadway credits. Tom, my husband, Tom Allen Robbins, in The Lion King, and
yeah,
so but then there was also fresh new talent, like we said, Andrew Durand, of course, Bonnie Milligan, who's my sister and my movie partner when the theaters are open, and then Taylor Iman Jones, who uh, is just opened yesterday, I think, or this weekend, um, on in Los Angeles in Hamilton, and we're waiting for her to come to Broadway in The Devil Wears Prada.
yes.
Um,
I
and
mean, are
so
you champing at the bit to see that? Please,
I
please
just
let it be.
am.
Please let it be
I
done.
hope. Last I heard, it was still coming. I don't know what's going to happen. But I mean, it's her time for sure. Taylor's, and she's so. The funny thing is, I went into my callback audition because I had auditioned like it was a TV show over
Hmm.
video because I
Yeah.
was in Europe, um, uh, on tour, and for Head Over Heels, I was auditioning and just sending in tapes, and they would give me some direction. I would change some stuff, and they'd say, "Do more of this, do some of that," and I was like, "Okay, this is great." And then they're like, "Okay, we." they were basically like, we want to offer it to you, but we want to offer it to you in person. We want to see you sing one more time. We want you to meet everyone. And I was like, I don't want to meet everyone unless you're definitely going to do it.
Right.
And
Because I'm
and
going
they're
to fall in love with those people.
yeah.
And then
And
good
I had to
thing
leave
bad.
tour. Exactly. And I'd have to leave, I had to leave the tour um that I was on with all of these other drag race queens, and we couldn't say what it was. And so they were like, what, what's going on? And they were just like, they snuck me out in the dark of night, I kid you not, to fly a red eye back to New York to audition. And Taylor was in there singing before me. Her voice was like going over the roof, and I was like, "Honey, I hope that that's not another person like my competition, because then we have a wasted flight, and I need to go back to this tour." I didn't know who Taylor was being seen for, like what she was reading for. Obviously, it was for my daughter in the show, and we've been fast friends ever since.
I love it. I love the shade of them flying you out at night. And ooh, the intrigue is
I was
just,
so like, oh, what's going
oh,
on here?
love it. Listen, I'm so dazzled by the way you've been able to use your platform for good. Speaking of Broadway, you're out there, you're challenging.
And Adina Menzel.
Yeah, and Idina Menzel. You're challenging stereotypes, and I want to see, maybe you'll say your favorite line when I ask you this question before we leave. Do you have any words of wisdom for trans kids, or kids that are just feeling other? They're not finding their way. They're not seeing what they are on stage or on screen, or kids who feel just like it's an impossibility. What do you say to those kids?
I'll say, first of all, we can't wait for folks to like lead us. We have to lead them. Unfortunately, we have to go in for that call that's not asking for a queer person or a person of color, or someone, if you're a minority in some way. Go in and show them the best rendition of whatever it is, if it's an audition or a job interview. Don't wait for them to ask to invite you in, because they might not, because they're unaware. And so go in and just know that it may or may not happen, but it's more likely to happen if after they've seen you. Obviously, it's only going to happen after they've seen you. And and I am encouraged. I was discouraged, not discouraged, but I was um, waiting to see what types of changes professional theater and Broadway were going to make with regards to sort of like the conversations that we've been having over the past year, that because Broadway has been closed, hasn't really been able to engage in those conversations until now. And I'm happy to see that when I see casting notices come through, that things are more diverse and inclusive. And it is possible, just like, like sort of like, quote, non-traditional casting that we were seeing a decade ago, was we could roll with it. I'm like, okay, this is a white mother and a black daughter. Okay, they're doing it. Great. And we could see it, and it's fine. It's a musical.
Right, right.
And
It does come down
and
to
then
that, right?
exactly. And then and so now I'm happy to see this stuff. And so if you're an actor or performer or wanting, or not even, if you are a carpenter, if you are someone who is great with sewing and hair, try to get yourself into the union. It's tough to break into them unions, but get yourself in there, because we need more queer and especially trans and non-binary talent backstage as well. It's so important. And so that's what I have to say to y'all youngsters. And then the other thing is, I will say my favorite line, credit to Jim Magruder and Andrew Durand, uh, thou better workest.
I love you. Thank you, my new friend, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I can't wait to meet in person and hug you and cheer you in many, many more great projects.
My
It's
pleasure. Thank you
Peppermint,
so much.
everybody.